Hello and welcome to the Confidence Academy podcast. My name is Lily Badcock and I am a transformational confidence coach and founder of the Confidence Academy Members Club, helping men and women just like you to build unshakable confidence and self-belief. Each week, I will be bringing you new episodes with advice and guidance to help you rebuild lost confidence, manage anxiety, and finally start living the life you were born to live. It is my aim to reach as many people as possible with the message that no matter what you're going through, no matter what your struggle may be, there is hope. And there is a way to create an amazing life for yourself. The incredible people I have been blessed to interview on the show are walking, talking examples of how this is possible. And I truly hope you will find their stories uplifting, inspiring, and motivational. The conversations are very open and candid and occasionally may include some adult language, so please take care when listening around little ones or grab some headphones. This podcast series is brought to you in association with Lily Badcock Confidence Coaching and the Confidence Academy Members Club. If you are ready to make the shift from anxious and frustrated to calm and confident, then visit www.lilybadcock.com today and get started with the free resources that are waiting there for you. I need you to know that you're not alone, that it can and will get easier, and that the transformation you seek is possible. You are more powerful than you know, and I'm here to teach you everything I know about harnessing that power and creating an amazing life on your terms. Before we dive in, don't forget to leave a review for us on iTunes and to check out the links in the podcast notes to the free resources we have available for you. But for now, let's get you on your way to living your epic life, free of anxiety and full of confidence. After all, confidence is yours as soon as you choose it. Hello and welcome back to the Confidence Academy podcast, and I'm joined today by the gorgeous Sarie Taylor. Sarie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for that introduction. It was lovely.
Thank you for coming on. So Sarie is an anxiety coach, which is kind of a broad explanation of what you do. And yeah. I'm going to let you explain in further detail in just a second exactly what you do and how you help people. But Sarie has come onto this podcast, as many people do, to share her own story of how she dealt with her own issues with anxiety and how that then led to her helping other people to do the same thing. So Sarie, welcome. And if you would just like to start by sharing your backstory with us. So where did it all start for you?
Okay, so I call it my other life because I started out in sales and recruitment. After I went to university, I had a sales job, worked in recruitment, was successful in it, but it was completely the opposite to what I do now. And to cut a long story short, I was, as you can imagine, in sales and recruitment, extremely confident, outgoing. Everybody saw me as, well, the gobby one, really. I was very, full of beans and nothing could touch me, all of that sort of stuff. And when I was 25, something just happened where over the space of probably 2 weeks, what I now know to be anxiety grew to such an acute place that I moved back into my mum's house and I would not actually leave my bedroom. And I always remember thinking, I now know where the phrase climbing the walls comes from, because I literally at one point was sat on a table as if I was going to find a way out of where I was, because I was going crazy. I literally did not have a clue what was happening to me. The only time I left the room was very rarely to eat, which I didn't do very much of, or to be sick, because my adrenaline levels were so high that I was just in a mess. So after being like that for 2 to 3 weeks, I got to complete desperation point where I felt my mum needed a break and I needed a break. So I begged them to take me somewhere to do something. And I was fortunate enough to have private healthcare. So that was the beginning of me spending a month in the private hospital, which I have to be careful because I don't like to badmouth it. And I think they do what they feel they need to do. But I was just basically very heavily medicated. So ultimately I did calm down and I did feel better to a degree, but I was completely spaced out, and it was just kind of a means to an end to get me back functioning in some kind of day-to-day life. But I didn't come out of there, or didn't go through that really still having a clue what had happened. So I thought that I was kind of broken. I thought something had happened, a chemical imbalance in my brain, or I just thought I was ill. So I came out after a month into what felt like a very scary world. I remember the first time going into a shop after it, again, I can't remember how much I had antidepressants, loads of Valium. I remember asking them before my mum came to pick me up from the Priory, saying, I need more Valium because I can't go out. I'd not left that place for a month. I was completely institutionalised. I remember going in a shop and almost feeling like it was an out-of-body experience, even asking the cashier, for something to pay for, or just conversing with somebody, because I was such a cocoon for that month. So that was that. And then it was a bit of a blur, actually, for probably a few months after that. Eventually came off the medication, but I was kind of thinking, what now? Like, I was then kind of in fear of, well, that's happened. I don't really know why. So what's to say that isn't going to happen again? And I was in constant fear of what might happen. So I thought, I'm going to have to investigate this, and I'm kind of quite like that. I'm a bit of a go-getter. So I was like, right, I'm going to investigate how I get rid of this forever, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so then I started to look into therapy. And again, I was still very of the mindset where I was ashamed of what had happened. I didn't quite understand. So I was quite reluctant, really, to even go into therapy. So I found a little plan, and I thought, I know. I'll train as a therapist. That way, I'll learn all about it, and it might help me personally. And I knew that the course that I was going to embark on, you had to be in therapy. So I thought, well, there's my excuse. I can tell everyone I'm in therapy because I'm training to be a therapist. So it was my excuse, really. So I trained as a therapist and managed my anxiety pretty well. Having lots of therapy really helped. But what would happen with my episodes, and everyone is different, but I would maybe be fine for 2 years and hardly feel anxious at all. And then over a prolonged period of stress, maybe something would happen. It would build and build and build to the point where it would become really acute again, where I would feel like the only way I could manage it was to go on medication. And it would probably involve 3 or 4 weeks of me wanting to isolate myself again. And so this might happen every few years, every couple of years. And again, I was just constantly then in that fear. So it felt like the in-between times where I wasn't acutely anxious, I was still always a little bit worried that actually it might come back. So although therapy really helped me and made me so much more self-aware, and I got better at self-care, all of that sort of stuff, which is great. I ate well, I exercised, all of those things that, I kind of realised I should be doing, so to speak. And I'm not saying that they didn't help, because they did, but that fear hadn't gone of anxiety. And so then I continuously throughout my life tried other things. So I tried hypnotherapy, NLP, all the things that I then again went on to training. And yet there was still something there that I was still living in fear of it, basically. So even when it wasn't there, it was, because the fear of it was there. So it would affect things like I might not want to go on a long haul holiday because that might trigger it, or things. So I would, realizing now looking back, I was still really controlling my life quite a lot. Even the fact that I worked for myself, I now see was me controlling my life, because if I worked for myself, it didn't matter if I got anxious, because I could manage that and I could continue to work and earn money. So I was really putting everything in place to protect myself from this anxiety, whatever I thought it was. I didn't realize fully what it was. So I was just micromanaging every aspect of my life. Even when I thought I was really well, I was still micromanaging because of that fear of anxiety.
Yeah, I can relate to that as well, actually. And I think it's interesting because a lot of the people I've interviewed on the podcast have had very specific things that happened that then triggered the anxiety. So basically they could easily see why the anxiety arose, because they'd gone through something hugely traumatic. Do you think there was anything specific that triggered yours, or did this kind of creep up on you where you just realized over a period of time that these things you'd been experiencing actually was anxiety and you couldn't really attach it to anything specific?
I think that there wasn't anything specific. What I now see it to be, which we'll talk about with these 3 principles that I'm going to mention to you, that eventually that really, really worked for me. And what I now realize is it was me trying to be in control of everything and thinking I could control everything, when realizing now I can't control anything, actually.
Oh my God, I so relate to that.
Yeah, so it's kind of me trying to do that for so long, and then what would happen is it would always be some level of prolonged stress that would then trigger it, because my nature was to then try and control everything. So it'd be like layering the things on top of each other, really. That's what it was. So it wouldn't be something specific. It would just be usually over a period of time.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting point to make, because anxiety is hard to deal with however it comes about. But I think if you don't know why you have it, and if you can't put your finger on what caused it, it's not so easy to then fix that thing, and that's where the fear of the anxiety comes from, isn't it? Because you don't know why you had it in the first place, so therefore you can't be sure it's not going to come around again. And that's a really good point to make.
It is. And I think one of the things I now know, again, from these 3 principles that I'll talk about, is I spent so long trying to work out why, trying to piece all the pieces together. Now, actually, no psychiatrist, psychologist, doctor, or anybody in this world can ever give you a categorical reason as to exactly why that happened, because so many factors can affect it. So actually, what I've now come to, and what gave me, again, part of the big relief from it all, was I don't actually really need to know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's kind of quite freeing, because actually I can try and understand it and put it all into a box but actually I'm never going to fully know. So, and do I need to know? So that was, again, another big kind of breakthrough for me, is, I don't need to know.
I really love that, because I think I was saying this to somebody, actually. I think it was on a call that I did earlier this week, because I've launched the members club for my academy now, and it was on the call in there, and I said to them, when I first learned about the concept of blocks and self-sabotage and all of that, it was really exciting, because I was like, that's why I've been doing this, and that's why I've been behaving this way, and that's where these thoughts and feelings come from. But then very quickly the blocks became my new identity. And then it became all about this belief that I had these blocks and therefore still couldn't move forward because I was blocked in some way. And then I was trying, like you say, it was trying to micromanage every bit of that, and always feeling like there was something to do. And
that's what I love about these principles. And I get so passionate about it, because one of the biggest things that comes from this is that every coach that uses these, people have experienced it, and the big thing about it is saying you don't have to do anything.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, one of the coaches I follow frequently says, there's nothing you have to do, but there's always action to take. And what she means is, we go through life thinking that we have to be doing all the time. And this belief that if I don't do X, Y, and Z, then I won't get the result that I'm after. Yeah. And she just talks all about coming from flow, basically. So there's always action to take, there's always intuition to follow, and you act on that. But there's no one set of actions that you take that will guarantee you a result, because, like you say, it's so completely different for everybody. I love that you've brought that up. So you mentioned at the end there that you found you stumbled across, so after you'd done your training as a therapist, and after you trained in NLP, and you trained as a hypnotherapist as well, and obviously you were in the Priory, and all of that stuff was great, but then you came across these 3 magical principles that I'm really excited to learn about that for you turned it all around. So do you want to tell us what that was, what the principles are, and how that came about for you?
Yeah, so I'd love to say that they were my principles, but they're not. They're originally from somebody called Sydney Banks. And if anybody wanted to Google Sydney Banks, the three principles, there'll be literally hundreds of videos on there. But basically, what Sydney Banks is kind of, he talks about where he sort of had his shift or his enlightenment or whatever you want to call it, is that what he realised is what we need to know to be at peace and have a quieter mind is we need to understand the relationship between our mind, our consciousness and awareness, and our thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the, I suppose, the best ways to think about it is often people will use the example of in a cinema. So your projector, which is projecting the film from the back of the cinema, that's like the source that everything's going through,
Mm-hmm.
is kind of your mind. And, you know, we've all got that. And then the consciousness and the awareness is almost like the screen. So what's going on in that head is then projected onto that screen. So that's why we've got the awareness of what's going on. We're projecting it onto that screen. And then what really brings that to life then is the film, the movie, they're our thoughts. So in a nutshell, we're experiencing everything in our life through our thought. And so you don't feel anxious without anxious thinking. Just doesn't happen. The thought triggers the feeling. So say for example, if you're watching a movie, you're watching a film that's quite sad, and you're sat watching it, and you can actually feel sad. Some people will cry at movies. Yet on one level, they know that that's not true. They know it's not real. It's not a part of their life, but they're thinking about it in such a way that they start to feel it as though it's their reality.
Yeah.
And that's how thought works. So what we can also do is the nature of thought is that it's transient. So thoughts come and thoughts go. And often when people talk about, to say like, for example, CBT, it's not something that's ever worked for me. It works for some people and that's fine. But what something like that is doing is looking at, you know, how do we distract thought? How do we stop ourselves thinking? And actually these principles, what's great about it is it's saying we all think all of the time.
Yeah.
You can't stop that. You cannot stop yourself from thinking. You can't stop yourself from having negative thoughts. We all have them. We all have positive ones. It's almost like saying, to stop you thinking, you're just asking to not be human, and we can't do that.
Yeah.
But what often will happen if someone's anxious is, rather than just noticing the thoughts that are coming and going and they're just transient, they're holding on tightly to some of the thoughts, and they're piling thought on top of thought on top of thought. And that's when the feelings then start to feel really, really overpowering.
I love that because that's something that was quite transformational for me as well. Although I didn't hear it through the term the three principles, but I learned the concept of our reality comes from our thought, basically. And when I first heard that, I thought it was kind of a bit woo-woo, because it sounded like it meant, oh, you think of something and then you create it, and you know, so if I think of a Porsche, it's going to appear on my driveway. And then I learned it wasn't that at all, and it literally is, like you say, these thoughts, it's just the way the human mind works. It's the way we're built as humans. And I love that you said, you know, it's not about trying to stop the thinking or trying to stop anything. It's about allowing, and that's the whole point. And I think it actually ties in really nicely to the topic I covered on the podcast on Tuesday, which was resistance versus flow. Because when we're in resistance all the time, that's when the anxiety builds up, because you're resisting, and what you resist persists. And and I agree. It was when I got it, because I heard it the first time and I don't think I really got it. I took it a bit too literally, and just thought,
that's what happens.
Everybody
that ever comes across the three principles by Sydney Banks, and even myself, that you can get it on an academic level, on a kind of, yes, I get this, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What starts to happen is, once you know that, and this is why it works, once you know that, you start to see it for real in your life playing out. And that's what we call an insight. So what you were saying a minute ago is you've not done it through those three principles, but what's happened is you've had insights in your life about how the mind works in relation to thought and all of that. And you know, when you were saying as well about the spiritual thing, the thing about mind is, And these 3 principles are based on the idea that we're all innately well. We're born well. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just the only thing that we're born with a fear of is fear of falling and a fear of loud noises.
Right.
They're the only 2, and everything else is learnt. So you know, you've just had a baby, obviously, and you know when you're pregnant, you know, there's like, I mean, you might not have done, but you probably have had that moment where you've gone, how am I creating a human being in my stomach? Like, how on earth is that actually possible?
Yeah.
And it's possible because it's something much greater than us. And
Yeah.
that's kind of your mind. Some people call it wisdom. So for some people, that's their spirituality. For some people, it's God.
Mm-hmm.
For others, it's nothing like that. It's just this knowing that there's something much bigger than us that allows us to be, you know, whatever that is for you. It doesn't have to be woo woo. I'm not like that at all. I wouldn't say I'm particularly spiritual. I wouldn't say, you know, I'm not religious, anything like that. But I really know and appreciate that there's things that go on that are much bigger than me, like the fact that I've given birth, just baffles at times. And it's that same wisdom that keeps us well. So even when people are in absolute throes of a panic attack and they think that they cannot cope and they cannot function, they always find a way to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the other thing that was very kind of mind-blowing for me, was when I was listening to a guy called Joe Vitale. I don't know if you've heard any of his stuff. No. But he was talking a lot about this, and it was an audio program I was listening to of his, and he was basically just talking about limiting beliefs. And he said, you know, if you think that you can't do X, Y, or Z, then that's a limiting belief. And he said, and if you're listening to this program and thinking this doesn't apply to me, then that is also a limiting belief. And it was so funny and so clever how he put it across, because you know, I think we get these suggestions of how we can help ourselves all the time. There's always, you know, avenues we can go down, things we can try. And often what stops us is our thoughts, isn't it? It's our belief that we will just instantly say that won't work for me. There'll be people listening to this right now, riddled with anxiety, saying that won't work for me. Yeah. And that's a limiting belief. And that is, you know, if anybody wants proof that what Sarie's talking about works, just look at your life as it is now, and monitor your thoughts, even for an hour or a day. And you will see how your thoughts are directly creating that reality that you're in. You know, if you're constantly focused on the fact that you're feeling poorly, you know, you can literally sit yourself in your bed and tell yourself you feel sick enough times and you will start to feel sick.
Yeah, I've done it many times.
Yeah, I mean, it used to, you know, you do it, don't you, when you want a day off work? Like when I was younger and I wanted to pull a sickie, and I would call in sick, but I would feel bad about, you know, the fact that maybe I wasn't. So I would kind of act like I was. And then, you know, a couple of hours later, I'd be like, actually, I do feel really ill. Like I do have a headache and I do feel a bit sick. And, you know, and the thing is, saying that irritates people, especially people with anxiety and mental health, because there's a whole team of people who say, you know, it's a neurological thing, it's chemical imbalance, it's not just, you know, it isn't just how you think, you know, and I get it. But your thoughts are so powerful, more powerful than you probably realize.
Well,
and
what? Sorry,
yeah, no, carry on. No, go for it.
I've been exactly in that place that you're talking about. And I had a lot invested in not believing in these 3 principles, partly because I have trained as a therapist and I spent thousands of pounds on not only training, but also in fixing myself and all of this sort of stuff. So to me, the completely simplistic approach to it was like, no way. There's no way that is going to work. There's just no way. And then the more I listened to podcasts and to people that had used them, there's so many psychiatrists and psychologists in America and places like that have trained the same way I have and have now gone, but actually this is the answer. Just many different things. And I was also in that place where I was like, yeah, but physically, there's no way that my thinking can create a lump in my throat like that, or that my thinking can create me to feel like I'm going to pass out. Like, there's no way that is possible. And actually, what our thinking can do is our thinking can create an imbalance
Yeah.
The other question I ask myself at times is, so if there isn't an imbalance, how can these antidepressants, for example, so when I've been on medication, how come they actually did make me feel better then?
Mm.
And I couldn't work that out. And I'm, again, as I said at the beginning, part of it is wanting to know everything and being in control and, and so I thought, well, how does that work? So I was questioning everything because I thought it's just too simple. And then the more I've learned about it, that what the medication does is, when you're going through a prolonged period of stress, or say, for example, our bodies, I don't know all the technical terms because I'm not a doctor, so I'll explain it in the only way I know, which is like layman's terms. But when we are in a panic and when we are having a lot of anxious thinking, we're going into fight or flight, which generally lots of people know about. Mm-hmm. So we're setting ourselves up to say, and we're telling ourselves we are in huge danger here when we're not. But just because we're not actually in danger, we're creating that reality through our thoughts. So our body reacts accordingly. What I see it is, it's like we get a shot of adrenaline. So we're giving it, there's a name for whatever it is we give ourselves. And I heard a doctor talking once saying that the shot that we give ourselves should last about 5 minutes in total. But during that 5 minutes, it reduces its effectiveness. So if we're in a panic, that could completely pass in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, I was sat there listening, thinking, I've had panic attacks that have lasted a week. I'm not kidding, like literally a week. So why is that then? Why is it not just gone out of my system in 5 minutes? And the reason it hasn't is because I was it was like I was giving myself a shot every 5 minutes, topping it up. Because we can get into this cycle with physical symptoms where it's like, your body is going to change when you are giving yourself a shot of adrenaline. You're going to feel it somehow. And if you're in a frame of mind where you're anxious thinking, if you're anything like me, then I would go, oh, but now my heart's beating really fast. Like, what's that about? Why is that? And I work everything out rather than just accepting and going, this is just as a result of my anxious thinking. And if I leave it well alone, it's going to go. But part of the thing that people can struggle with, and it does get easier over time, it's learning to become comfortable with that discomfort.
Yeah.
Because it isn't nice. And I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. It isn't nice, but it will pass unless we keep attaching loads more thinking to it. If we try and fix it, we try and work it out, we try and understand it, it's going to stay.
Yeah.
Whereas if we just let go and say, I don't need to understand this, but I am aware that it's going to pass and I know it's from my thinking, it's not going to hurt me, then it goes.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I've seen this in myself, because obviously, like you say, I was the same. I remember when the doctor first told me I had anxiety, I almost was like, well, no, that, I don't want that. That doesn't make sense. Like, it has to be something worse than that because I feel so ill. Like, that sounds like a total cop out, and like not anything tangible that I can fix. Like, you don't walk into Boots and find an anxiety section of pills you can take. So, I was like, it's got to be the flu or something, because I'm physically unwell. I'm passing out and I'm dizzy and, all the rest of it. And then I realized through my own self-development and through journaling that I had attached a hell of a lot to my own identity to the anxiety. So it was almost that without that, then who am I? And how, and so many people wouldn't be willing to admit that that's even the thing, or not even admit it. Well, like, they wouldn't even be willing to open their mind to the fact that possibly that's where they're at. But I did realize that I was, it was part of who I was. And, part of me was like, well, and even since I started, because I kind of changed the direction of my work at some point, and I became a confidence coach. And then even for that reason, there was a part of me that was like, well, you have to still experience anxiety because now you're helping other people with it. So you can't overcome it completely, because then you won't be able to help them. And that actually came out in journaling. I actually uncovered, a bunch of these beliefs that, I wouldn't have any empathy for people anymore if I got better, and I wouldn't know who I was. That was it. And at the root of all of it, and this is what I heard on the Joe Vitale program, at the root of all of that, it's just this belief that we're not going to be okay. And it sounds ridiculous because when you have anxiety and you want to get rid of it, and I desperately wanted to get rid of it, on no conscious level did I choose to keep it. And yet I was choosing to keep it. And it was because on a deep level, I believed that without the anxiety, I wouldn't be okay. Yeah. And that, you know, you have to kind of sit with that statement for a little bit and go, hang on, what? Because obviously the obvious kind of conscious level thinking is, well, of course I'm going to be okay. I'll be much better if I don't have anxiety. Yeah. But anxiety is comfortable, especially if you've lived with it a long time. And if that is who you are as a person, and if that's how people see you, and if that's how you've been showing up in the world, and, you know, if everything that you do is based around the fact that you're anxious or stressed or depressed, or, you know, you can insert any one of those things into that, then actually getting rid of that is even more scary, even if it's something you really want, because then you don't know who you are. And I was listening to something yesterday. Sorry, for everyone listening on the podcast, that's my little boy Fred you can hear in the background. This is real life, folks. There are children. Actually, it's 9:15 at night. These children should be in bed. Good night, Freddie. That's cool. But yeah, it's, you know, as scary as anxiety is, and as horrible as it is, and as debilitating and, you know, life affecting as it is, it can still be more scary to live without it if you don't know what that looks like. And
yeah, because it's just your thoughts creating that feeling. And the other thing that I love about these 3 principles is that it kind of says, well, and again, what was the shift for me is since I was in the primary that time, my label was that I had anxiety.
Yeah.
And then it took me a while and now if somebody said to me, do you suffer with anxiety? My answer would be no.
Yeah.
Because I don't have anxiety. Do I get anxious? Of course I do. I'm a human being. And it's kind of, there's a difference between feeling anxious. The reason we get that feeling is for good reason. It's our body's way of doing what it thinks it needs to do in that moment to protect us. It's really clever. Without it, we would be screwed, basically.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between that and to keep getting in the repetitive cycle of having it there so intensely when it isn't needed.
Yeah.
But it's that thing of people being told that they've got anxiety. One of the doctors I was listening to, a psychiatrist in America who uses this a lot, he's got some phenomenal stories of using this with people with all sorts of terminal illnesses and all sorts of things. But one of the phrases that he said was, the only difference between somebody who's diagnosed with schizophrenia and someone who isn't is that somebody that's schizophrenic believes every thought they have is real.
Yeah.
And you know, it sounds for some people, again, a lot of medical professionals like go, that's just so discounting, like you're saying that they're just doing that to themselves or blah, blah, blah. And it's not about that. But I think once people keep listening to this sort of stuff and you have your own insights, you start to realise, and the biggest, again, another big shift for me, when I was listening to something and I remember just bursting into tears because the realisation that I'd had and I had to stand up to was that I had made myself ill for so long. And in one way that was a huge relief, and in another way it was really sad.
Yeah. And that, yeah, there's this feeling of, oh, awesome, because that means I can change it. And at the same time, oh crap, I did this. Yeah. And, you know, and can I, if I've done it this long, can I turn it around?
Yeah. And it doesn't matter how long people have had it for, or how acute it's been, or how severe. I mean, we could all sit there, anyone that's experienced anxiety, and share stories and say, well, theirs was worse than mine, or, well, I didn't leave the house for this amount of time, and I didn't. None of that matters, because underneath, innately, we're all well.
Yes. Yeah. And I would say, if anyone is listening to this and feeling triggered by it, feeling like, you know, if you're yelling at your podcast delivering device, whatever you're listening on, you know, your iPad, your phone, or whatever, if you're yelling at us right now going, you don't know my story, then you are the exact people that I want to talk to, because I was there, and I know Sarie was there as well. And if this is triggering you, then I would just challenge you and say, okay, let's just say for argument's sake that you're completely right, that your version of events is completely right. If that's the case, then how is trying this going to harm you? You may as well give it a try. Just open your mind a little bit and see if this shifts things for you.
Well,
Because at the end of the day, it's a choice, isn't it? You're either going to keep doing what you're doing or you're going to try and change it.
it is. And I think I've had so many clients tell me that they're angry with me.
Yeah.
And I say, that's okay, that's fine. And, well, let's just keep going. Let's keep looking in the right direction. Because again, what people do is they focus so much on the mental illness. They forget about mental health, which is what we all innately have. And all I want to do now with these 3 principles is keep referring them back to mental health rather than focusing. So people can get frustrated because they want to tell me every symptom they have, every negative thought they have, and I could do all of that. But actually, all that's doing is piling more thought on. I'm more interested in, okay, well, let's look how the mind works. Let's look how we drop thoughts. So, that example I was saying before about the cinema, where a film can actually make us cry because we feel sad, because our thoughts are sad thoughts. Say if we were sat next to someone in the cinema and suddenly their mobile phone started going off, you're going to drop that thought of sadness in an instant, and you're probably going to be angry because you're going to be like, why have you got your phone on? And that's how quickly we drop thought. That's how our mind works, is to drop thought. You might be in the middle of something at home, really intensely focused on something, then the doorbell goes. You're going to stop thinking about that, and you're probably going to go, oh, yeah, I'm not expecting anyone. Who's that? That is how quickly we naturally are able to drop thought. But when we're anxious and anxious thinking, we're not allowing that natural way to flow. We're holding on to it. We're keeping on to the thought. We're holding on to them as tightly as we can, and it's creating more feeling.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that. That's such a good point. That is such a good point. We're a fickle bunch, aren't we?
We are, but what's about that is once you start to realise in your life how quickly you can drop thought. So again, someone that's maybe going, oh, I've been anxious all day, I would put my life on the fact that not every single minute and second of your day you felt anxious. There's been times where you dropped that thought and you've got on with stuff.
100%.
The only difference in that is that you're thinking. That's all the difference is.
It's like anything else, isn't it? It's like if you go, oh, everything's going wrong. Well, everything isn't going wrong. It's just that one thing went wrong, or maybe a few things went wrong. But, or everybody hates me. Well, no, not everybody. Like maybe just one person, and maybe not even hate. We do have this habit of just bunching it all up and making this sweeping statement that this is what's going on.
Yeah, so we're just thinking it's bad. We just think it's bad. Everything's just thought. And that's the other thing that clients get so annoyed with me at. I'm like, that's just thought. Is that not just thought? And I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
Yes, it's okay.
Something I learned to do, and I didn't consciously learn to do it. It's not like I heard it on a program and then was like, okay, this is now how I choose to feel. But something I've learned to do over the years that I've been digging into this stuff is to really sit up and pay attention when something pushes my buttons. So if something winds me up, if something causes that reaction where I'm like, oh, shut up, like you don't know, I've now learned that there's something in that. Like I've seen truth in it. Even, and I hate to say this, and if he can hear me, it's going to be even worse. But if my husband says something that annoys me, even if he says something that's mean, and he's saying something to upset me because we're having an argument or whatever, if it triggers me, it's because on some level I see truth in it, or I fear truth in it. Because I say this to kids that I teach all the time. Like I teach a lot of kids singing, and so inevitably they fall out sometimes, and they'll come up to me, and someone will go, oh, so and so just said that I'm blah blah blah, or somebody just said that I'm stupid, and I'll say, oh, are you stupid then? And they'll go, no. And I'm like, oh, so why does that bother you then? Because if that person had called you a black polar bear, like, would that matter? No. Like, if they called you a blue fish, would you be offended? No, because you're not a blue fish. Yeah. So if somebody accuses me, it's like if somebody suggests that you're a bad mum, or not, like no one would say that, or very few people would say that outright, but quite often you feel judged in the way people speak to you or about you. Yeah. And I look at that now and I say, why am I triggered by that? Do I think on some level that I am a bad mum? And of course I don't think I'm a bad mum, but maybe something happened that I wanted to look at. And it brings you back. You were talking earlier about being in control. To me, it brings it back to me. It means that somebody can't affect me with their words unless I choose to allow it to affect me. And my choice now is, if it affects me, it's going to affect me in a positive way. And I'm going to learn from it, and I'm going to grow from it. And It's funny because I know you're a hypnotherapist as well. And actually my hypnotherapist on a few occasions has triggered me in sessions because she has said, or she suggested that, you know, it's been me that's created something, or it's something about the way I'm thinking. And nobody likes to think that they're creating that kind of experience for themselves. Like, why would anybody want to feel like that? And what I've learned now is if I come out of a session feeling a bit peed off, then I'll allow myself to feel peed off. And then later I'll go, right, why did that annoy me? Because if I didn't think it was true on any level, it wouldn't have affected me. So maybe there's some truth in it. And annoyingly, she's always right. But then you grow. Yeah.
You do. But the other thing with that as well is, and I'm just playing devil's advocate a little bit here, because a lot of the stuff you say sounds so familiar to me. But actually, there's also a little part of it that, what if you didn't go back to it later and you just left it? What if you didn't need to work out? You know?
Yeah.
We just kind of, I don't know if you've ever found yourself doing this, but I've found myself in the past going, oh, hang on a minute, what was I anxious about 10 minutes ago? I'm sure I was, and I'm like trying to remember it. And I'm like,
oh yeah,
remember. Actually, when it's gone, it's gone. It's like Nicola Bird, who's been mentoring me in these 3 principles. She used an example in one of her podcasts, which I really like, but I can't remember who she originally got it off. But it's talking about like taxis. Thoughts are like taxis, and there's loads of them. So you could be walking along the street and there could be hundreds of taxis going past, and they're all thoughts. Yeah. So they're going to come up, they might hover a little bit, and then if you're not interested, they're going to keep driving past. But what we do when we go into anxious thinking, it's like, oh, here's the taxi that says I'm a really bad mum. Oh, you know, I'll flag that one down, I'll jump in it, and I'll go for the ride for the next hour.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, if you'd have just let that taxi hover and go, the next taxi along might have been, oh, where am I going on holiday next year? You know, it might have been a much nicer ride, because they're always going to come and go. And that's what how I explain now as being a coach to people with these 3 principles is, I can't make you have insights. They're going to come. For some people, they'll come straight away. For some people, they'll take a month. For some, they could take a year. You're going to get the insights when you get them. But my job as a coach is, you know, the insights are like buses.
Yeah.
You've got to be at the bus stop. You've got to be at the bus stop in order for that bus to come, and I'll sit there with you until that bus comes. But other than that, you know, and the way you're at the bus stop is by keep learning about how your mind works, and that's when you'll get your insights.
Yeah. And I think it just starts with it doesn't even have to be a belief. It can just start with like a what if, I can overcome this? What if there is a way to feel better? What if I can get up tomorrow and not have a panic attack and not feel anxious all the time, and et cetera, et cetera. So we've talked a lot about these 3 principles, but we don't know what the 3 principles are. So my first question was going to be, after everything you've been through and everything you've trained in, what's been the most transformational method you have found to combat anxiety? And I know it's these 3 principles. So just talk us through what they are and give us like an outline as to what they are.
Well, when we've talked about them in a way, but this is the thing that again gets frustrating for people, because it's not like a script or a theory that you can, there are lots of books out there, people have written about it, but it's not a theory that you can teach that easily, because it does come from just a knowing and an insight. So the 3 principles, it's almost like the universal principle about how our mind, thought, and consciousness work. So it's about understanding those 3. They're the 3 principles: the mind, the consciousness, and the thought, and how they work in relation to each other. So like those, there's a lot of metaphors involved in it, and a lot of examples like the taxis, like, you know, examples of where we can just suddenly drop thoughts. So if someone in the cinema, it's almost, there's lots of people in this industry giving lots of examples, because what that does then is just creates you to sort of find your own examples in life, because that's when it starts to shift properly, is when you see it for yourself. Because I can sit and tell any client, this works, this is how it is, until they feel it on a level where they see it in their own life, it's not going to make a difference.
Yeah. I think that's so true as well. That's so true for a lot of things, isn't it? It's like I could sit in a room for 2 hours and tell somebody about singing, but until they actually do it and feel it for themselves, they're not actually going to learn it. They'll learn something, or they'll kind of, it would be more like the metaphor I like to use is, it's like going to a party, and you get to the party and you can see the party through the window, and you can hear the music, and you can, you can see the food and everything, but you can't get in. And I think that's what it's like when somebody explains something to you, but until you actually dive in and try for yourself, and singing is definitely like that, and and this is the same thing. It's and so initially, like I say, you've just got to have a bit of an open mind, and to think, what if this could work? What if there's something in this? What if this could work for me? I've talked about the what if statements before. It's my favorite way of kind of interrupting negative thought, if you like, because if you're telling yourself a story of, oh, I can't feel better, or I can't do this, or I can't do that, isn't it fun just to go, but what if I could? Because then you start to think, well, what if I could? And then if I could, how would that look? And that's when you start to see, like, the taxis, if you like. That's when you start tuning into the right bus to get onto, rather than the crappy ones that make you feel rubbish.
Yeah, it is. And it's that thing. One of the things that I would say a lot to clients is, what if you could experience that differently just through your thought?
Yeah.
So it is that what ifs. And what happens with this is, I say to clients, because I do like a 1 week anxiety course online just on these 3 principles, and one of the things that I say, and part of the way I do it is, I say they get a video, but then I say, send me as many questions as you want via email. Now the reason I do that is because I know it's going to bring up lots of but what about this, but what loads of options. And that's good, because in a way it's kind of like, I can, every single question I've ever been asked, I can always relate back to showing that it works in the way of these 3 principles. And that's what happens, is you start to, and it's interesting because people go, but I don't quite believe this, but yet they still keep coming back for more. And that's when they're getting it, they're starting to get it, and they start to trickle in. And then what will happen over time is, I didn't just suddenly wake up one morning and go, I've had an epiphany, that is it. But I would look back over a week and go, oh my God, I wasn't anxious in that situation now I would normally. Or think, one of the big things I noticed is, going away on holiday would always be a trigger for me, and I'd still go and I'd force myself, but I'd spend the first 2-3 days feeling anxious till I settled. Then I'd have maybe 3 days of feeling okay. Then I'd have 2 days of being worked up to having to come home and change my routine again. So it was just a nightmare, really. And one of the big things I noticed, and my husband said, I'm going to book a flight to such and such. And normally I would go, right, well, we need to make sure the flights are these times, and where are we going, and blah, 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 and all these conditions I would put, because if I didn't do those conditions, I might be anxious. And I just found myself going, oh, great, that would be brilliant. And almost picturing myself on the beach. There was none of that. There was none of the worry about the what ifs. And I was like, oh my God, what's happened? Yeah. And it just naturally changed. I say yes to so many more things that just don't even consider. And if I catch myself asking myself, well, what if I was anxious? I just laugh now, because I'm like, why would you even go down that road?
Yeah.
And the more you do that, then the more it becomes ingrained. It's a bit like a knock-on effect then, that it just has a huge shift, and it's just so natural and so subtle, but so powerful at the same time.
Yeah, and I love that you've made that point, because I think this is the other thing that we tend to do, not just with anxiety methods either, but with anything that we want to improve in. We're looking for this instant shift. We think, oh, I'm going to do this program, or I'm going to read this book, and then everything's going to be better. And then when it isn't, we go, oh, it didn't work. Whereas if you can just live in flow and in allowing, and that includes allowing the anxiety to show back up if it wants to, because like you said, we need the anxiety. It's a relevant and necessary emotion that we need. But not on the level perhaps that we've been experiencing it. And I was listening to something only yesterday, and she said that, really these deep-rooted fears that we have just come from the fact that we don't know what lies on the other side of it. So, it's like I said earlier, if you're looking at overcoming anxiety as an example, then because your subconscious or any of your conscious can't see what lies on the other side of that, it doesn't know that it's safe. So that in itself can bring up feelings of anxiety, because you don't know. But at the end of the day, I think, like you say, maybe you don't need to know. Maybe you just get to try these things and be in the state of allowing and of flow, and don't look for these big shifts. It's not that they won't come, because they may, but don't base all of the results on, you know, if I don't feel 100% better, then it didn't work, because in my experience that hasn't been how my recovery has been at all. It's like you said, it's more like you don't even realize, it's just the situation might come back around, and then that's when you go, oh my goodness, there's a time where I would have stressed out about that or had a panic attack or something, and you realize that you haven't. So it's more like, oh, when did that change then? Like, you know, when did I stop worrying about that? And then you can just be happy that you're not anxious anymore, and you crack on with your day.
And it's so subtle, but again, it's just about not attaching, again, a load of thought to it. You know, it's kind of like, we can't control anything. We can't, and trusting, this is where the mind bit comes in, and our wisdom, and trusting that, actually, do you know, if you're going to have a panic attack, you're going to know what to do in that moment. It doesn't matter whether you're in your own home or in a local place or in a supermarket. It's about getting used to and trusting that part, that your wisdom, the same part that helps us grow a baby, and just the same part that why the baby knows just to move into a certain direction and turn ready to come out, all of that stuff that we just know will take care of you. So you don't have to plan and prepare for a panic attack, because actually you don't know exactly how that's going to look. But what you do know is that whatever happens, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, and actually, when you start to, like, and this happened to me, if you start to experience or recognize when a panic attack is coming on, you know, like you say, you can drop the thought. You can instantly recognize and go, oh, I'm feeling like this because I have been thinking negatively. So I'm going to, there's a technique that they mention in the book Ask and It Is Given, called pivoting, where you literally pivot your thoughts. So if you're feeling anxious or worried or fearful of something, recognize in that moment that you're focusing on what you don't want. So to shift that, you literally stop and say, okay, so what do I want instead? Because right now I'm focusing on what I don't want. So what do I want? Like, what do I want? And it's that thought dropping you were talking about, because suddenly then, you know, when I've done this, I'll be worrying about a bill or something, or, you know, or going out on stage, or starting a new class, or like anything like that can bring up anxiety. And then if I go, oh, what do I want? And then suddenly I'm led on a beach in Dominican Republic, or, you know, doing something wonderful. And, you know, it doesn't cure your anxiety forever, but in that moment, it pivots you away from that negative thought pattern, and you can break the pattern. And the more you do that, the better you get at doing it. And then eventually you realize that you know, like now, I'm not saying negative thoughts don't come into my mind, because like you say, I'm a human being. Of course they do. But I can drop them like hot potatoes, because I recognize instantly that it's not what I want. It's not what I need. I will assess a situation straight away and go, okay, is this anxiety warranted? Like, if I was about to bungee jump or something, then sure, anxiety is more than welcome to come along for the ride. And in fact, the anxiety would win. I definitely would not throw myself off of any height attached to a rope. That's just my preference. But you know, in those situations, I'm absolutely more than happy for my anxiety to show up. But you know, at other times when, you know, I host shows, for example, I do shows with my choir, and I feel anxious about that. But I'll very quickly choose to go, well, actually, yeah, it's normal to feel anxious, but I choose to feel excited instead. And actually, the two feelings are not that different.
No, they're very similar. And the other thing is, and even because sometimes, you know, when you're in that throes of that real panic, where almost your thinking becomes so, it's like, you know, again, I did all this training as a psychotherapist, learned all this stuff, and then I could be in the midst of a panic and like, have I actually learned anything? Like, where's it gone? Where's it gone now? Why can't I access it? But actually, again, the thing I loved about the simplicity of these three principles is, I don't need to remember techniques. I just know that it's thought-based, and that I'm safe and it's going to pass. That's all I know in that moment, and that's all I can access. And the question that I get asked a lot, which probably if people are listening to this will be asking themselves, is, but yeah, when I drop a thought, but then I still have a lump in my throat for 3 hours or for 2 days, or because our body needs some time to catch up from when we've dropped that thought. We've released chemicals into our body, we've done whatever, we've messed with the chemical balance. It just takes time to settle. But again, it's just knowing that that's all that's happening, rather than going, well, why am I still like this, and why am I, no, it's just body is taking a little bit of time to catch up with your mind. That is all it is.
Yeah, I love that. And so my next question is, I know the answer already, but my next question is, do you believe everyone or anyone can overcome anxiety?
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Mm,
I don't, but by that though, I don't mean that they would never feel anxious, because that is a
right.
normal human feeling. But what I'm
Yes,
talking about is, I do not believe that anybody needs to live with crippling anxiety that affects them from getting on with their lives how they want it.
absolutely. I'm in agreement as well. And, my whole tagline is that you can thrive in spite of anxiety, because I think sometimes the pressure of having to overcome it completely is too great. And that's why so many people end up struggling with it for life, because they're trying to go from 0 to 100.
Mm.
Whereas, it's everything you've been saying. If you can just come back to the knowledge that you're going to be okay, and you will be,
Yeah.
uh, that can shift so much. That's a really powerful knowing. It's a very powerful thought. And I would even say I'm not a huge fan of fake it till you make it. I would rather you just make it till you make it. But
Mm.
but you know, in the very beginning, if you have to just think to yourself, I'm going to be okay, and focus on that and just see what that does for you, then I guess that is a little bit like fake it till you make it, because you might
Yeah,
not believe it at your core, but you can still
yeah.
tell yourself that.
There's
And
some, yeah,
yeah,
there's something in it. But I think that fake it till you make it, yeah, in some ways I do like it and in others I don't. But I suppose in a way, what sounds like what you're saying is, it's that bit of where I would see it almost like becoming comfortable with the discomfort, that actually
mm,
that you can go to the supermarket and feel a bit anxious, but that you're going to be okay, because it's almost that thing of, I truly believe that nobody has to live with that, but
yeah,
actually what they have to do is accept that, well, let's just say I did have to live with that forever, because it's the accepting of,
mm,
for me, another thing was, well, actually, what if I had to accept that every now and then I had to go on medication, if that's what my wisdom was telling me I needed? Well, that would be okay. And just the very knowing of that means that you don't
mm,
need to, because it doesn't show up anymore.
yeah. Yeah, I love that as well. And it's that freedom to choose. I know I've had people on this podcast who are still on their medication, and they believe that's what they need to do, and that's how
Yeah,
they are able to thrive. And so great. Like, I think
absolutely.
take the pressure off yourself. It's quite often it's just this need to, we make all these rules about what has to be in place and how we have to be, and we look around and go, oh well, so and so's doing it without meds, therefore I have to. Well, no, just find a way to be, unbelievably happy in your life, and whatever that takes, then do that. And like you say, that will probably then lead to one day where you maybe don't need the medication. But the thing is, if you do, then you do. I think it's having that acceptance, isn't it?
It is,
um
and once, I think when I was saying before, I don't know if I finished it off, but what the medication does is, it gets that, from you constantly living a prolonged fight or flight response, it does
mm,
affect the balance, the chemical balance. It doesn't mean it's broken it and there's something wrong with you. It does get it off kilter, and it would eventually settle back itself. But what the tablets can do is that they can assist and aid with getting that balance right again. And I hear so many times people say, well, I came off my tablets and I was fine, but then a year later I had to go back on. Well,
yeah,
that's probably because you got stuck in anxious thinking again a year later, and the balance
yeah.
started to go out of kilter a little bit again, because if it was that you were broken, then why would you have been okay for that year?
Mm, that was definitely the case for me. I didn't want the medication they gave me, and I came off it pretty quickly within 6 months. But I do feel that I needed it in that moment, because, like you say, it just accelerated my ability to get back to neutral. And then
Yeah,
from that place, I was able to, I got a little bit of hope back. Whereas before, I didn't have a lot of hope.
yeah,
I was just riddled with the anxiety and panic constantly. And there was just more of that and more of that and
yeah,
more of that. And the meds just kind of, it was almost like they slammed the brakes on and stopped
yeah,
everything and was like, right, stop, calm yourself down.
yeah,
Now what are you going to do? And I was able to then think, right. And luckily for me, I had an amazing doctor as well, who kind of supported it and said, you don't need these meds forever. Take them for now and then find a way to cope. And he was the one who said there are other ways. And he suggested CBT, and it didn't really work for me either. And again, I know it does work. I know plenty of people it has helped enormously. Just for me personally, maybe it's our type. If we're very much in this place of needing to know and needing to be in control, maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But the point is, And the whole point of this podcast, and not just this episode, but all of them, is that there is a way to feel better than you do now. That's the bottom line. And, you know, definitely, whether it's CBT, hypnotherapy, EFT, whether it's these 3 principles, you know, whether it's your medication or like a million other ways that you can find, there is a way to feel better. And I really, really hope that you find a way to find whatever that is for you, because it's different for everybody. So for anyone who's listening right now, who's feeling lost and frustrated and wanting to make that change, because I know that's how I felt when the anxiety was at its worst, do you have some advice, like maybe 3 steps or a group of steps they could take that they could just get started? What would you advise? So if somebody came to you from that place and they were like, right, I need your help now, what can I do to get started? What would your advice be for those people?
Well, first thought that comes into my head is that I always kind of find myself wanting to say to people, first of all, is give yourself a break.
Yeah.
Because often when people are in that, oh God, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, I've got to fix it, is instantly, you know, that thing about you saying putting your foot on the brakes with medication, to me, it's kind of, we can put our foot on the brakes by giving ourselves a bloody break, which is often what we're doing. Yeah. I'd say the biggest thing is knowing that the feeling does not come without the anxious thinking.
Right.
And to constantly remind yourself of that.
Yeah.
And I would say just, get the support that you feel is right for you. Trust your mind and your wisdom. So if you feel that you want to get medication, do it. If you feel that you want to try CBT, try it. I would say you have nothing to lose with any of this, and you will find, you know, I could look back now and go, do you know what, if I'd found these 3 principles, I wouldn't have bothered training as a psychotherapist, I wouldn't have done any training in hypnotherapy, I wouldn't have, but do you know what, I got where I got when I was ready to get there. And it's kind of, your journey is so unique and individual to you. So many questions I get asked from people is, should I do this, or what do you think of this? And frustratingly, my answer for them is, you know what's best for you.
Yeah.
They do. And if your mind in a quiet moment is telling you, do you know what, I really need to go to the doctors because I've got this lump. There's a difference between, when your mind and wisdom is speaking, it's much calmer and much clearer. When you panic speaking, you know, because it's loud, it's fast, it's aggressive. So if you're kind of going, do you know what, I think I better go and get that lump checked, then that's probably your wisdom saying, go and get that checked. If you're going, oh my God, I've got a lump, that's it, I'm going to have cancer, I'm going to have to Google it, I'm going to see, that's your panic talking. And there's a huge difference. So what I would say is just listen to your own wisdom. So know that no feelings come without thought, and listen to your own wisdom and give yourself a break, is what I'd say.
Yeah, awesome advice. And so we may have just covered it, but in the final word, if you had a megaphone and the ability to reach every anxiety sufferer in the world right now, what would your inspiring message to them be?
Well, you see, it wouldn't be inspiring, it'd probably be irritating, but it'd still be my message. The message would be, anxious feeling does not come without anxious thought. Yeah. Yeah. So it's not, they won't find it inspiring, they'll find it irritating, but hopefully they'll then start to see, oh, actually, maybe there's some truth in that.
Yeah, and you know, and it is inspiring though, because to add to that, I just want to say, just give it a try. Like, even if that's annoyed the hell out of you and you can't see any possible way that that's true, you know, I'm going to irritate you as well, but I'm going to say, well, how's your method working out for you? You know? Yeah,
go out and try and prove it wrong, because that's kind of what I was doing in the beginning. I was looking for all the reasons why it was a load of rubbish. I was looking, because I had all this training, like, of course I was going to find a way that this wasn't true. And the more I explored it, the more I was like, oh, well, I'm glad I've just overcomplicated that for the last 10 years.
I want to say as well, you know, if you're listening to this podcast, then whether you know it or not, there is a part of you that believes you can get better, because otherwise, why would you download a Confidence Academy podcast? Yes. Why would you be listening to these episodes full of people who are backing up? There is a belief in you that you can get better, because you're looking to this podcast to back that belief up. That's how this works. That's how your mind works. You have a belief and then you look around for things that back it up. this podcast is backing up that belief for you. So, you know, you might have a bunch of, you know, surface crap going on where you're going, no, this would never work for me. But, you know, if you're still listening at this point, then you believe on some level that this can work for you. And so I would just hang on to that. And if that isn't proof of these 3 principles in action, I don't know what is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's you know, it means that even if 99% of your thoughts are negative, then 1% of them aren't, and maybe follow that 1%. Just go after that, because there will be plenty of people that never download a podcast, that don't listen to these programs, that don't sign up for coaching or training or read a book or do any of these things because they truly don't believe that there's help for them. If you are someone who reads a book or listens to a program or, you know, finds these ways, then it's because you know you can improve it. You know there's something more for you. And more than that, I just think, I think anxiety comes up when we are just slightly off our path, or maybe a lot off our path. And, you know, we're here for a reason. It's going to get boring now because I say it pretty much on every episode, but you're here for a purpose, and your purpose is not to feel anxious. But maybe the anxiety is part of your journey, which is what Sarie was just saying. You know, what if you could believe that every single thing you experience and go through was completely perfect and completely meant to be? You know, if you could believe that, then the panic would never come up, because you could just think, well, sure, this is part of my journey and I will get through it. I will overcome it. And that is the end, you know, that's the megaphone message. You know, even though I know, Sarie, you said, you know, you've got an irritating message for them, but you've been hugely inspiring as well, because you've given them that message too. And me as well, you know, this is hugely inspiring to me as well. So thank you so much for joining us on this episode. If people want to reach out and connect with you online, how would they do that? Where can they find you?
I have a website, which is www.sarietaylor.com, which is just my name. I do quite a lot of videos I have a couple of groups, free groups on Facebook. They can find via my page, which is Coaching Healthy Minds. So it's on Facebook, Coaching Healthy Minds. Awesome.
So and we'll link to that in the show notes as well. We'll put those links so you can just click on them.
Yeah, great.
Cool. So yeah, if you want to hook up with Sarie, then please do check out the show notes. You can click the links there. I'll also be inviting Sarie into the Confidence Academy podcast Facebook group, so that you can come in after this episode and tag Sarie in any of your questions or comments or anything that you would like to say. You can tag her up in there. And Sarie has also agreed to come into the Confidence Academy members club as one of the guest experts. So if you are already a member in there, then you can look forward to learning a little bit more about these 3 principles and how you can apply them. And if you're not already in the academy and you want to be, the doors are open until the end of April. So again, the link is in the show notes. Join us in there. It's a very low monthly fee, and you're getting ongoing coaching and support, not just from me, but from all the amazing guest experts that I'm collaborating with throughout the course. So click those links and check them out. Do let us know what you thought of this episode and ask your questions. I'll be back next Tuesday for another episode of this podcast, but it just remains for me to say thank you again once more to Sarie. Thanks for being here.
No problem.
And massive, massive luck with your business as it goes forward. What you're doing is absolutely incredible and so needed. And I hope if anyone is listening, if you have resonated with Sarie, and if you're feeling that nudge to get in touch with her, then do it. I mean, she just said there's a load of free stuff as well. So, you know, there's really no excuse to go and get that help. And if you're feeling the nudge, follow that and see where it leads. So thank you once again. And to everyone listening, remember, confidence is yours as soon as you choose it. And that's us done for another episode. I hope you are now feeling uplifted, inspired and motivated, and ready to start making those positive changes starting today. If you loved this episode and would like to connect with me or any of my amazing guests, then get on over to the Facebook group and join the conversation there. And for additional support and accountability, why not become a member of the Confidence Academy Members Club? You will find all of the relevant links in the show notes beneath this episode. In the meantime, I'll be back again soon with another new episode and more amazing guest experts. But until then, look after yourself, dream big and live bigger. And remember, confidence is yours as soon as you choose it.